fairness and justice is just instilled in me from the beginning, and how to protect those who aren't able to protect themselves. Being able to represent my alma mater and serve Gonzaga in this way as the chief legal officer has been truly the capstone of my career, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for being with us today, and it is a special day. I'll be interviewing Maureen McGuire, who sits as Gonzaga University's General Counsel. She is sadly retiring, so she will be leaving us, but we felt that in celebration of Women's History Month that we would interview Maureen, maybe for the last time, and have Maureen share with us her brilliant career as an attorney and just as a wonderful colleague, wonderful human being. Well, Maureen, as I just mentioned, we know that you are retiring. You spent, as I understand, 10 years here at Gonzaga University as General Counsel. But, of course, your experience spans the span is probably more than just a few years, and our audience would be very interested in hearing your story. So let's begin here. Let's talk a little bit about where you were raised, where you were born, where you were raised, and your upbringing.
Well, I'm a Spokane native. Grew up here in Spokane, born in Seattle. My parents moved here when I was 3 months old. I started my education just a couple blocks away from Gonzaga at Holy Names Academy. And after that, I went to Marycliff High School, an all-girls Catholic school. My parents' choice, not mine. I always joke that I was sentenced there, and I'm glad I was sentenced to 4 years at Marycliff because it ended up being a very important foundational part of my life, I think. The Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration are well known as being outstanding teachers. And I think they also instilled in us the idea that you can do or be whatever you want to do. It was also at Marycliff that I enrolled in debate because my mother wanted me to do that. Believe it or not, I was painfully shy as a young person, very, very shy. And so my mother thought to get over that, I should take debate. We went to debate tournaments, including one here at Gonzaga when I was in high school, actually 2 here at Gonzaga, because I was in debate for 2 years. So it was in high school, I think, that my interest in the law was really budding strongly. We had the opportunity to have an intense 1-week session on a particular topic, and we were given 12 choices, something like that, and the one I picked was criminal justice. I just had this interest in justice and fairness, and I think part of that comes from the family that I grew up in. Our family was, besides my parents, one older brother and then a sister 3 years older than me with Down syndrome. Yeah. And my sister Kathy was the only person in my world that I knew of with a serious disability, because when she was born, my parents were advised by the medical community to institutionalize her. And most of the people who with disabilities like she had during that era were institutionalized at Lakeland Village. So she was the only, differently abled person that I knew for many, many years. And I saw how my parents and my brother were so accepting and loving of her. And so I think for me, that was what I saw at home. But out in the community, there was not much acceptance or tolerance for someone like Kathy. She was feared because she looked different and she acted different. And so for me, fairness and justice is just instilled in me from the beginning, and how to protect those who aren't able to protect themselves. After high school, I went to the University of Washington, graduated from there with a degree in political science. And it was kind of a pre-law kind of education, focusing on classes that one might be interested in if you were going to go to law school. I continued living in Seattle for a couple years, working at University Hospital and Harborview hospitals that are teaching hospitals for the University of Washington. And I did admissions in the emergency room, which was really good preparation for the kind of legal work I was going to be doing down the road, where you have to triage a lot of crises that are arriving all at one time. So you may have nothing to do for a while and then everything happens. It's kind of like that in law sometimes, and certainly in the general counsel's office. I then attended law school here at Gonzaga Law, graduating in 1981, a proud Zag. We were in the old building, which is very different from the current law school, which I call the Palace. We were in Webster Grade School, which was actually a school that my sister had gone to because there were very few options for people with disabilities at that time, and Webster was one of the few schools that had a special ed program. But it ended at age 12, so my parents had to find other educational opportunities for my sister, so they sent her to a private school run by a nun here in the Gonzaga neighborhood, Sister Antonio. She's well known, now deceased, but it's just another little Gonzaga connection. I have so many growing up where I was close to Gonzaga and never thought I would be back in the role.
So a question for you, and going back, and I'm just thinking about your family, but thinking also about your parents. Your parents, where did they grow up, and what was their profession?
Well, my parents never went to college, so my brother and I were first-gen college.
Oh my, okay.
My dad grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, and then came out, go west young man looking for work, and met my mother in Seattle. Once they were married, she was a domestic engineer.
Sure.
Took care of the three children.
Yeah.
And my sister had a lot of special needs, medical and physical and such. And then my dad had a serious medical situation with the first open heart surgery in Spokane, almost dying when I was 5 years old. So she had the full responsibility of the household for quite a time. But she was up for the challenge, very strong woman, 100% Irish, and she's someone that I still to this day, she passed away when I was only 24, but still inspires me to this day because of the strength that she had and the values that she had.
So Maureen, was there much conversation in your home about the importance of higher education, going to college?
There wasn't a lot. Because my parents didn't have that background, maybe they weren't comfortable talking about it. I think the good sisters, the sisters of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, certainly had that on their minds as they were teaching us and kind of leading us in that direction. But I do not recall many conversations about that at home, other than I wanted to go to the University of Washington just like my brother did for all 4 years, and my parents said, "No, we think you should stay home for a while longer." I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, because he's a male and you're a female, and it's just not safe."
Wow.
So I did go to Eastern for my first
for a little bit,
2 years. Yes.
Yeah, I remember when I began college, and I think you were mentioning earlier, and for the audience, Maureen and both her brother were first-generation college students. But it's all about, the institution you choose. I remember choosing Western Michigan University because my brother went there. My brother, he's 11 months older, and I thought if he can get into Western, then I can get into Western, and that's what happened. But in your case, why Washington? Why University of Washington?
Just like you. I wanted to follow in my brother's footsteps. I idolized my older brother. He was 7 years older than me, and he was going to the University of Washington, so I wanted to do that too. In fact, after he graduated from there, he went 1 year to Gonzaga Law.
Yes.
And then decided law wasn't for him and transferred to Seattle University and got an MBA there. But I'm sure that had something to do with my interest in law as well, that he thought he was going into law, but it ended up that I did instead.
So Maureen, you were mentioning a little bit about your family. certainly your education in law, and in your career in law. But I understand that your son also attended law school. So talk a little bit about your son.
He did. One of my proudest moments here at Gonzaga was his graduation from Gonzaga Law School in 2014. When he graduated, I was a cabinet member and was on the platform with the president to present his diploma to him. Little did I know that when he started law school that I would ever have that opportunity to do that, but it was certainly a special occasion that day.
Yeah, I bet it was. Well, you became became an official ZAG because you chose Gonzaga University for law school. Tell the audience a little bit about the beginnings of your career. Once you completed law school, you passed the bar, and then off to your career in law.
And I became a judicial law clerk at the Court of Appeals for my first 2 years after graduation, which was a fantastic experience because you get to work on a wide variety of cases. You're drafting legal opinions for the judges, interacting with the judges. You're seeing some of the best attorneys present oral argument at the Court of Appeals. So it's very educational, and I loved it. So that was the first step.
Sure.
Then, as my clerkship was ending at the end of this 2-year period, I just happened to run into a classmate from Gonzaga Law School at the grocery store who says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be looking for work soon because my clerkship is coming to an end." And he said, "Well, I'm at the Washington State Attorney General's office. It's a great place to work. You ought to consider it." So I applied, interviewed by Christine Gregoire, who was the head of the Spokane office at the time. Later became the Attorney General, later became the governor of the state of Washington. She interviewed me and said, "I see you work for Judge Rowe." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, if you can do that, you can do anything," which was true. He had a reputation for being, the Spokesman Review wrote this, the resident curmudgeon on the court. So I got a workout, but for me, I had the nuns, and so, they'd given us a workout too, and it really didn't faze me as much as it did other people. So I started at the Attorney General's office in 1983, and I started representing Department of Social and Health Services, primarily Child Protective Services, doing child abuse and neglect litigation.
Oh, my.
That was the bulk of the work, and I can tell you it was very rewarding work because you really have the opportunity to make a positive difference in children's lives, literally life-saving in some cases. But it also could be very emotional in a sense. Certainly. Because some of the cases were so sad and tragic and all that. And through that work, I came to realize how blessed I had been to be born into the family that I was born into. So Sure. Loving, so supportive. I didn't realize that this level of child abuse and neglect existed until I did this work. So it was very, very good work. So it was great experience, but at one point, the Spokane division chief came and approached me and said, "Maureen, there's an opening in the education division. Would you be interested? The attorney that represents Eastern Washington University is moving to Olympia." And I said, "That sounds interesting. I would like to look into that." So I met with the president at Eastern Washington University. He interviewed me and said, "Okay, you'll be our next assigned attorney." And I represented Eastern along with 2 community colleges at that time.
Okay.
I had EWU and some colleges for about 10 years. And then I became a supervisor within the Attorney General's office of 6 different divisions of attorneys: consumer protection, corrections, labor and personnel, education, licensing and administration, and then also for a period of time, the torts division, which was the
Sure.
litigators. So it was a large group of people, lots of responsibility, and then I also had the legal assignment. So at one point, it was quite a lot. And so we decided to kind of reconfigure the assignments, and I took Community Colleges of Spokane so that I could maintain the supervisory role. So I had the Community Colleges of Spokane and the MAC, the Museum of Arts and Culture, which is actually a state agency known as the Eastern Washington State Historical Society. And they were also a client of mine. I was there for about 30 years when a friend of mine sent me an email and said, you know, there's this opening at Gonzaga University for general counsel, and we know that you do this kind of work, so you or someone you know might be interested in this. And when I read it, I thought, that looks really interesting. I think I'm going to look into that. So I applied. I didn't hear anything for a while, so I thought, well, they've probably filled the position. That's fine. I'm great where I'm at with the AG's office. Wasn't looking for work.
Sure.
And out of the blue, I get a call, will you come to Gonzaga for a full day of interviews? Actually, I think I did have a brief phone meeting before that, and then that turned into a full day of interviews from 8 to 5.
Oh, my.
And I was leaving College Hall after meeting with my final interviewer, which was President McCullough.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself as I'm walking to my car, boy, I don't know if they want me, but I want this job. I want to be here. I think I'm meant to be here. So I think it was a day later that I got the call from President McCullough offering me the position to be general counsel for Gonzaga. And I have to say, it's truly been the dream job. Other attorneys have told me that. You have the dream job, and it is. Being able to represent my alma mater and serve Gonzaga in this way as the chief legal officer has been truly the capstone of my career, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And initially, because I'd already put in over 30 years at the Attorney General's office, I thought I would be here around 7, and I committed to 7 years. And as time went on, just having such a great time, and working with President McCullough has just been so wonderful. I agreed to stay on.
Yes. Well, he oftentimes, he will say, Maureen has a great loyalty to the law and a great loyalty to the institution, but loyalty to people as well. And so I think that is, I know that's a very, very high compliment. Now, I've learned also interesting things about your family, just relative to, we've had really good conversations about civil rights, racial injustice, conversations that just surround people, but people that have been marginalized and underrepresented. And I know of a story, I don't know if it was your father or grandfather, but someone traveling to the South to help with voters' rights, is that correct?
That was my father-in-law,
okay.
who sadly I never met, but he's my son's grandfather. His name was Tom Lynch. He's written up in the book Black Spokane, the history of civil rights in Spokane.
Yes.
And Tom Lynch was one of the freedom riders, along with Carl Maxey and another Spokane attorney, who were invited to go down to Mississippi to basically fight the poll taxes.
Yes.
And if you've ever seen the movie Mississippi Burning, you know what happened to some of the freedom riders.
That's right.
They were murdered by the KKK. And in the book, Black Spokane, Carl Maxey is quoted as saying something to the effect of, "We escaped with our lives from Mississippi."
Oh, my.
So Tom Lynch was a civil rights attorney here in Spokane. He had gone to Gonzaga Law at the same time as Carl. They were both boxers. That's how they paid their way through law school.
Interesting.
And so I learned a lot about him through his family.
Sure. Now, your brother, I'm sure the audience wants to hear about your brother. It is interesting that in the story, I'll let Maureen tell it, but I love the part of skipping school, but skipping school for a very, very, very good reason that one day. So share that story about your brother.
Well, I've already mentioned how I kind of idolized my brother. He was my hero, and part of the reason is because he was a social activist at a very young age. He had in his bedroom a library of books that included things like Soul on Ice and these books that other people weren't reading, James Baldwin.
Oh, my. Yes.
And so one day, the Spokesman Review, which the local paper we received at our house every morning, and on the front page was this picture of the civil rights demonstration that had taken place at the Spokane County Courthouse. And this was in 1965, just after Martin Luther King did the Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery
Yes.
for the Voting Rights Act. And so there were demonstrations across the country in support of that. And Spokane had one as well. And on the front page was this picture of the demonstrators, and there, kind of in the middle, was my brother holding a sign, Freedom Now. And that sign showed up in his bedroom. And that's how my parents found out that he had skipped school. He went to Gonzaga Prep, skipped school to go to this demonstration, but he didn't get into any trouble for it. I think my parents were proud of him for having done that. But it's a testament as well to the Jesuits, because he's Jesuit educated.
Yes.
And one of their primary fundamental emphasis is social justice,
Yes.
Equality for all. And so I feel that, that lives on through him, through his daughters. He's left a beautiful legacy, because that photo is now in the AP archives. It's been reproduced so many times. It lives on. He lives on, I think, through that photo, and I'm very proud of what he's done. And it inspires me to think about, what I can do or should do to help.
Certainly. Well, on a closing note, Maureen, and we wish you well in your retirement, and I have thoroughly, in my almost 4 years, enjoyed working with you. But if you could share with the audience just a few, snippets of words of wisdom, what would you like to share with all of us, and whether we're talking about, the employees, the staff and faculty of Gonzaga, certainly the students of Gonzaga, what would be some words of wisdom that you would leave with us?
2 words: kindness matters. I really believe in treating everyone with dignity and respect, and being kind to others, treating others the way you would want to be treated, the golden rule. I have found in law that it has served me very well in being able to work with people under difficult circumstances. And so if I can bring some calm and kindness and conciliation to that, I find that that's helpful. And so I always emphasize that the way people are treated makes a huge difference in whether or not they want to launch a legal dispute, whether or not they want to fight about something. And so we can get better results, I think, in treating one another well. And that kind of goes back to what I witnessed in my home of origin with my parents and my brother, and how everyone treated each other. It was just the way it was. The second thing I think I would say as far as advice would be that mentorship is finding people that do what you're interested in doing and talking with them. And then, as you are employed, learning from the mentors, supervisors perhaps, learning from them and taking what works for you. Not everything that you might observe from a supervisor or mentor works for you. You have to do the right thing for you. But learning from others. And then the other side of that is teaching others and helping others. In my career, I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of law students. At the Attorney General's office, I was the law clerk coordinator for quite some time, and worked with so many law students. And I didn't realize it at the time how I could have a real positive impact, but they would come back later in years and say, you know, when you were my supervising attorney, I learned so much, and I just am so grateful for that opportunity to have learned from you, and it made an impact on me, and I'm grateful for that. And I didn't realize that that was happening. So it works both ways. You learn from others, and hopefully you give back to another group of people, as I had the opportunity to do. And I am most grateful for having had this opportunity to be at Gonzaga as general counsel. Most grateful to President McCullough for giving me that opportunity and for his support. I don't know that it was mentioned, I was the first female general counsel here at Gonzaga, and I attribute that kind of support to the President McCullough. At the time, there were 2 other female cabinet members who were mentors as well to me as I stepped into a leadership role here. So it's just ongoing all the time.
Well, that's important to know, especially as we celebrate Women's History Month, and certainly appreciate your words of advice, Maureen. We all do. And I thank you for the time that's spent listening to you and your very, very fascinating life, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy hearing your story as well. Thank you.
Thank you.